Hello, everyone. This is WD Carousel Podcast. I'm Ian.
And I'm Crystal.
And we're going to talk about some kind of, what we call it, dystery?
Yeah, dystery.
We're going to have a dystery episode, which we haven't done in a while, and this one's not park-related, so I'm kind of excited to do that.
You're going to stretch your degree muscles a little bit?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about some of the background, the technology involved with the movies that we see that Disney makes now in terms of animation and stuff like that. Yeah. So we're not going to talk about live production stuff. We're just talking about animation today.
Yes.
So I think the big thing today is we're going to talk about the difference between Pixar and their 3D animation, or I should say computer-generated animation, and Disney Animation Studios and their computer-generated animation, which feels like sort of like...
Shouldn't they be the same thing?
It's like if Burger King and McDonald's owned each other. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So...
No. Let's not compare them to Burger King versus McDonald's. There's quite a bit of difference between Burger King and McDonald's. Let's get this right.
Okay.
Although I will say, when it comes to Disney animation studios versus Pixar animated studios...
Let's not do a comparison with...
You really need to make sure that you know which one's which. And the only way you can tell, or at least I can tell, is by how they present the story.
Yes. Because from a story perspective, a Disney film now, even though they're both computer-generated, a Disney film is going to present itself much like the original Disney films with princesses and
you're going to have a more fairy tale feel.
Yeah, whereas Pixar is basically what if blank had feelings. That's just the easiest way to...
Essentially, but does Coco fall underneath that? Because Coco's the most recent...
What if dead people had feelings? It works. It still follows the pattern.
Okay. I'll let it happen. This is the first Pixar movie, I think, that actually was a musical, though.
Yes,
so
it was.
That was something that was slightly different.
Robert and Amanda Lopez, who I am fans of. So that was pretty cool to see. And they pulled it off very well, and it was still in a very Pixar way. So it was kind of blurring the lines between what does Pixar's movies mean and how does that work. But they still managed to make it about what if blank had feelings. So
that's true.
It's okay.
That's true.
So let's start. So to kind of get the wraps on this technology, get your head around it. It all started with something that Disney started in the 80s, and it was called CAPS, which stood for... I need to look at my notes.
It's okay. Well, why don't you hold them on your lap? That way you're not looking on the floor.
What notes? Whose side notes? It was called CAPS, which is Computer Animation Production System. Okay. And this was not designed for computer-generated animation. It was for traditional cell animation, traditional...
Okay.
Old school Disney animation, which would be originally, hand drawn and transferred using their planes, cameras and all the original stuff. But it was taking so long, they thought it'd be really cool if they could build basically a digital system that could assist in making that process happen faster. And it was really early; no one had done this yet, and they basically had to build these specialized desk workstations that were all integrated with a computer. It was all connected to a mainframe with scanners, and they could actually do a lot of their animation work in a computer at these crazy high bit rates, and it was a really amazing piece of technology. I'm not going to dive too deep into it.
Disney's always been a forerunner with technology when it comes to any sort of animation or, production. And so this was just taking it to the next level.
Right, and they've been really big pioneers with it. And so they had to go out, and it was the early 80s. So there wasn't that much in terms of computer technology.
You weren't even born
yet.
No,
I wasn't. And this was a time where high-end production graphics workstations were still kind of in their infancy. Not many companies had... It wasn't like you go out to HP and say, I want one of your professional Z workstations, please. That didn't exist.
Those are words.
But... So that didn't exist. So they had to go to a little computer company that made art-specific production workstations, and that little company that made them was called Pixar.
Yay!
And at the time, Pixar was only doing their own stuff as kind of a way to prototype and test, technology they could sell. So they built these Pixar workstations, and so Disney worked with Pixar to build CAPS, which was an integration of very specific hardware and very specific software that basically the first movie that they made with any CAPS-based technology was Little Mermaid.
Oh, really?
Yep, and that was just the very end sequence.
Oh.
And the first one that was actually all caps entirely was Rescuers Down Under.
I like The Rescuers Down Under.
So that was the first one, and they made them all the way up. So Caps was in use for all those movies in that period of time. The very last film made with Caps was Brother Bear.
Okay.
Now you may be saying, Ian, there is more traditionally animated films that Disney made after Brother Bear.
Ian, there are more traditionally made films that have come out after Brother Bear.
And in fact, they did not use Caps for them. They actually dismantled the entire Caps system, except for one workstation to read old files. There's still one back there, apparently somewhere in Disney Animation in California. There apparently is one still back there. But what they have now is... It's basically just a stock off-the-shelf system called Toon Boom Harmony is the name of the
Toon Boom Harmony.
And it's used by almost every company that still does traditionally animated style stuff. It's all in the computer using stylus tablets, high-end, Intuos tablets and stuff that are all integrated into a computer workstation, just a classic Mac or Windows workstation, and it's just all done in the computer. Okay. But it's all off the shelf. So they are using that for anything else they have to do that's not CG.
So that goes all the way up through Princess and the Frog.
Yes. Okay. So Princess and the Frog being the last traditionally animated film they did, that was actually done in an off-the-shelf system called Toon Boom Harmony. And so that was Brother Bear was the end. So Caps, then that shows you kind of the background of how Disney and Pixar had a relationship.
And we kind of covered a little bit about this when we were talking about Pixar.
Yes.
So we're not going to reiterate
all of that, but
too much of that.
That basically tells you about how they've been kind of technology sharing for some time. And that brings us into the next thing. So now let's talk about Pixar. And they, leading up to making their first film, Toy Story, they were developing a system to render 3D animation, or computer-generated animation. 3D animation, it's all kind of similar. But the thing was, nothing existed that was really, available for the kind of workloads they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to do it where they had tons of processors that they could, basically build a bunch of computers in the room and network them all together and make them render computer-generated imagery using 3D models all, from a workstation. And that didn't exist yet. Being able to just, build these models out, keyframe animate them, and then render them out in, some sort of ray-traced photorealistic way. That didn't exist. So or not much. And so they invented their own system called RenderMan. And that was in collaboration with some other types of hardware, software they used on their end for making the actual animations. So RenderMan was the program that made it into cinema-grade frames of photo, basically. Okay. It was the rendering engine, which is one of the most important parts of any type of animation that uses computer-generated stuff. So they invented this in the 90s.
Okay.
And they used it for themselves, and some people kind of associate RenderMan, when you hear it, with Pixar-based productions. However, they've since licensed that technology out to a great number of companies, including Industrial Light and Magic for all the Star Wars stuff.
Okay.
Illumination Films? What's the name of the company?
I don't know.
It's the company that made
Give me a hint.
Despicable Me. It's
Illuminations.
Yeah, Illuminations. Yeah, so so that's the same rendering engine that they use for Pixar stuff. So it's kind of the industry standard, especially for motion picture, because it's kind of designed for it. And it's really good at using distributed workloads, and it's kind of become an industry standard for a lot of stuff. Okay. And so you think of it as the Pixar one, but they've done some really high-end, especially Industrial Light and Magic. Mm-hmm. They've rendered an entire sequence where they've rebuilt people digitally from the ground up, and it's really hard to tell. That's all RenderMan. That's
Princess
Pixar.
Leia, though.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That was actually... we're not going to get into that. But it's incredible what they've done. And so people think of it as just kind of computer-generated for, sort of not super realistic stuff. But it's been used that way, and it's all at Pixar. All of the engineering happens at Pixar, which is really incredible.
So Disney no longer innovates? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, that's where we're going. So
okay.
we're about to find some interesting happen here. So of course, when Disney, as you were about to allude to, Disney, when they went over to computer generated imagery for all their movies, they went to Pixar and licensed out RenderMan, and then they built their own facility for RenderMan. So all of the early CG stuff that they did was all using the RenderMan engine, but they used a different animation tool set. They use just what's called Autodesk Maya, which is an off-the-shelf animation system. That was how they did all their actual animating, all the animators used.
I'm just gonna nod my head and trust you.
So they used this, and it's an off-the-shelf system. They probably made their own modifications, because Autodesk allows that when you work with them. And they built their own thing, and they just started using this off-the-shelf thing, and then Pixar's RenderMan as the rendering pipeline, and then that worked fine.
Okay.
It was totally not a problem.
Okay.
So that went up through, like, Brave and all of those early ones. Name me a couple of early CG ones. That's, like, Brave, and I feel like I'm missing a really early one that's important. Meet the Robinsons.
Oh, I love Meet the Robinsons.
Those, I think, were all in RenderMan.
Okay.
So that was very early on. But, so it gets interesting by the time we get to Frozen, where they needed to do stuff with snow that hadn't been done before.
Up Frozen.
Well, that was just inevitable at this point. I know. They were talking about early Disney animation studios computer-generated stuff. So, with that one, they had to build this stuff for snow and how to make it interact and doing all the stuff that Elsa does, where it does all the ice and everything. RenderMan didn't have a specific thing for that, so they had to start doing some of their own engineering work at Disney specifically to build this stuff. But as far as I'm aware, it was all built on top of the RenderMan platform. They just kind of expanded.
Hold on. I think... Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Continue.
Brave is actually Pixar.
Is Brave Pixar?
I think Brave is the only Pixar princess. Hold, please. Brave Pixar.
Is it Pixar?
How do I tell anymore?
Produced by Pixar Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney. I was wrong. Wait. Pixar Animation Studios. Yeah, it was Pixar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at that.
Wow. So, as Crystal pointed out, Brave is actually Pixar.
Yeah.
So here we are. So,
I know my princesses.
There we go. So
I can contribute. Okay.
So...
Anyways.
Meet the Robinsons was the first, and there was probably one or two after that I cannot remember that were early CG for Disney. By the time Frozen came around, they had to kind of build on top of it to get all the snow and everything all put together. And after that, so they had all this crazy technology they built for the snow, and they just were using the RenderMan platform, but they were doing their own engineering. And that was a big deal. That was a big turning point for them. So the movie that actually really created the need for this to start with was Big Hero 6.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I can't remember. There's somebody I know that I'm friends with that hasn't seen it. It makes me upset. Anyway. Irrelevant. So for Big Hero 6, they were trying to do something way out there that they were kind of like, we feel like we can't use RenderMan for this one because there's going to be a lot of stuff that it isn't really designed for. And B, we're Disney Animation Studios and we don't want to be Pixar. Mm-hmm. I think was kind of... I don't know this. This is all conjecture because I don't know why exactly they did this. And I don't think they really... Yeah, all very speculated because they never explained exactly why. But to me, it sounds like they really wanted to get away from Pixar's technology and kind of develop a Disney-specific platform. So what they did is they invented a thing called the Hyperion Rendering Engine.
Sounds important.
It's very important. And what it basically is a complete departure, but it replaces the same thing that Pixar had for their rendering engine. So it replaces RenderMan entirely.
Okay.
But they kept their animation platform, I think, more or less the same. So I think it's just a modified version of Autodesk Maya, very similar to the way they had it. But now they've got this new lighting system, and if you've seen Big Hero 6, you'll know that it's very pretty. It's a very pretty movie, and one of the things that was really hard was Baymax was going to be very hard to animate or render properly in RenderMan because he's, kind of translucent.
Yes.
He's made of air.
He's not opaque.
Right. He's
a balloon.
He's a balloon, and making an entire character out of balloon is not an easy thing to do. So what they ended up having to do was build their own system that had a different lighting technology that actually, not to get too deep into like ray tracing, but basically the way that these systems work, these rendering pipelines, is they actually are able to track light through a scene using the meshes and the materials as kind of it actually computes what it would look like. It actually simulates a real world.
So, I hold up a balloon,
right.
It reads it, and then it figures out how to translate that in a computer?
Well, actually, we're getting there. But what I'm saying is it basically, in the computer, measured some parameters you fed at the material, and it simulated light through it.
Okay.
So, but you are making a point that I'm getting to, which is, with the new engine, they were actually able to use real-life situations and replicate lighting from a real place and then drop it into the movie, which is how they did San Francisco in that world. They were actually able to light it using real-world light readings and all that kind of stuff. So it really makes it feel very deep and very dynamic by being able to do that. And that was all with their new rendering engine, which it looks completely different than, if you really look at it, it looks very different from what you see in Pixar stuff. So they really did make a departure. Mm-hmm. And they've been continually adding on top of it. And the latest big addition to the Hyperion rendering engine was Moana for the water.
Yes.
Because they basically had to make the ocean into a character. And in the past, the ocean and any water they build is simply a simulation. It just reacts to what you do. And so they use that, for the boats and stuff. But when the thing has to, the water's to come out and throw her, back into the boat or whatever it's doing, they had to build an entire new engine inside of Hyperion so they could actually do that properly.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pixar already had the technology to animate water, but Disney did not want to use Pixar's already existing formatting for water, so they created their own over in the Disney Animated Studio.
I don't know this for sure.
Okay.
All I know is they had already swapped over to Hyperion by this point.
Okay.
So part of it was maybe just that they wanted to be able to do it in their own system they'd already been using for a couple of movies. But also there may be a pride factor, who's to say.
Because I know that there was at one point in time they were doing a lot of information sharing back and forth, and they'd be able to even go down the hall and be like, so I'm trying to animate this piece. How do I go about doing it? What do you guys do?
Right.
Give me some advice, give me a place to start. And then after a while, Disney cut them off and said, no, we are Disney Animated Studios, even though we are just, down the road, down the hall.
Yeah.
And so you need to figure it out yourself using the systems that we have. And then Pixar was not, again, able to go to Disney and say, hey, so we're trying to do this. Do you guys have any ideas? And there was almost a gag order put in place for the two animation departments
having to,
not being able to share.
Which I could totally believe. I haven't read it personally, but I could definitely believe that being a thing, especially the fact that they put the effort into building their own rendering engine, which most people don't do because they just buy RenderMan. Mm-hmm. So it makes a lot of sense that they would probably do that. But so getting to the point where now they have Moana, which is using its own system, and they've kind of developed this fully fledged out, entirely unique rendering engine. Now you've officially separated the two. You've got Pixar, which uses its own production stack, which starts with their custom animation system called Presto, which they are extraordinarily secretive about. They rarely show it. There's like a couple of screen caps in the world of the program in its modern state. Very, very few times you get to see it. But the understanding is it's based on Autodesk Maya to a certain degree and a couple other things, but it's built very custom and uses its own system that lets people collaborate on scenes at once. So it's a very cool system. And it's possible that by now other more off-the-shelf systems have the same capabilities, but they like their system, so they use it.
Yeah.
And then Disney has Autodesk Maya, so they're a little bit off to the side, and they run through their own Hyperion rendering stack separately. And now it's kind of developed out into this whole thing. Now, to an extra point with Moana, this is the point, that very early scene where she's a baby and one's out in the water opens up? That scene wasn't written for the movie.
I knew that.
Yeah, that was actually a technical test that they did. It was
a test for the water,
the water engine, yeah. So they tested it for the Hyperion engine when they had built the water system, and they simply left it in the movie because the directors were so jaw-dropped.
Yeah,
it was such a cute scene, and everyone's jaws were on the floor, and so they're like, okay, well, I guess we have to keep it. So
and now that song's in my head.
And now that song's in your head. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so that's kind of the thing now with the separation between Pixar and Disney and how they both kind of live together but also separately. And that's so some of the ways you can tell a lot of times between Pixar and Disney is like you said, storyline is going to feel very different between the two. The other thing that you're going to notice that's different is how they animate their characters.
That's true. That's very true.
With Disney, you will see that they follow more of the classic Disney pattern: gigantic eyes, very tiny waists, and then men that are very bulky and, you know, kind of...
And then we have Elastigirl with those curves.
Yes. Yeah, thick with 2 C's.
But we actually have multiple shapes, styles.
Yes.
Even into the shorts with Bao. When the Bao short came out, that was a completely different shape of a character than what they've had.
Yes, and it really shows you, because if you ever, I challenge you, go and find, not challenge, but go and find,
challenge you.
Go and find pre-production stills and design concept art from Pixar stuff, and then go and see some from Disney stuff. The Pixar stuff has a really awesome style, especially with some of the guys that are the main pre-production artists there. Like, I think his name is, I can't think of his name now. There's 1 or 2 of them that are really, really good illustrators, and they have this awesome style. And if you see their just sketches, you will see it immediately and how they finally render it. It's amazing. An amazing connection, whereas with Disney, I think the styling is more traditional. Looks more like a traditional princess stuff, so that's how they render them out. So they have that very skinny, stick figure, gigantic eyes kind of look.
To be honest, that's how I was able to remember that Brave is not a traditional princess.
Yes, because she doesn't
Brave
have that.
does not look like a traditional Disney princess.
Correct.
She's shorter.
Yeah, Merida
big
has
hair,
smaller
big
eyes.
face.
Yeah, she has a different styling entirely. Yeah, so it's very interesting, but those are things to look for. Now that the technologies have gotten so similar, they're going to continue to grow more and more in a way that looks very close to each other. But it's all going to be how people drive them, is basically where it comes down to. Even though it's 2 different systems, the only way you're really going to know is how people drive those rendering engines, because they have so many of the same capabilities.
Yeah.
But
it's all how you use your tools.
Exactly. So... Anyway, I think that kind of sums it up. I hope I didn't bore you. It's a lot of stuff.
Nerd rant of the day.
Hey, yeah.
Yay.
So anyway.
That's okay. It's still really good information because
I think it's fun.
I think most people don't realize that there is a big difference between them. And they've shared a little bit.
Yeah.
But that the styling is completely different. The way that they do it, the technology is completely different.
Yeah.
To the point of almost where, I don't want to say it's like a rivalry, but they're definitely challenging each other
in some
to be
way.
like, okay, well, we created this. Okay, well, I'm going to create this, and then we're going to create this, and go back and forth and back and forth.
Exactly.
So hopefully this can only help both companies get better. Because having a little bit of rivalry helps keep you on your toes and stops you from being complacent. Not that Disney's ever been complacent about, their productions, but it's just going to get better.
Very interesting that they kind of ended up in the same development space, even though they didn't used to be. So it's kind of fun to watch that progress. So anyway, well, thank you for watching. My name is Ian.
And I'm Crystal. And I hope you have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away.